Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone that's watching us today. Welcome to the Turing Boundaryless podcast. My name is Lauren Doritas. I'm your host. I'm an account executive here on our fast scaling startups team at Turing. And today I'm very happy to have with me my very special guest, Diego Alegria, who is head of quality assurance of Turing. Diego, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Lauren. Thank you very much. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. It's a kind of a cloudy day here in Cincinnati, but we'll get past it.
But it's a very sunny and beautiful day back in São Paulo, Brazil.
I'm a little bit jealous. I'm sure it's gorgeous. Well, hopefully you get a chance to enjoy the weather.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I'm really thrilled to host this podcast with you since we've been discussing the best approach to implement and enhance quality assurance in a project.
Cool, let's do this.
Awesome. First, Diego, for our listeners, could you tell us what exactly QA is, what the team does?
Oh, yeah, that's a very good starting point. So for people that doesn't know, QA stands for quality assurance. And essentially, a QA team aims to release software products with good quality, enough to fulfill requirements, all the specifications, and with a very sharp focus on the user experience. And the testing itself, it's just a small part of the entire test cycle, if you know what I mean. And we can dig into that a little bit more. But that's pretty much it.
I'm sure, it sounds easy, but I'm sure it's not at all. I'm sure there's a lot to balance. So what are some of your visions and values for the QA team here at Turing?
Yeah, okay. So as a very fast-paced company, we are, my vision to the QA team is to become a top trusted team to advise cross-functional teams, whether we are in a good shape or not, to enable our products to the live environment. And doing that in a very dynamic, reliable, and robust test operation. So that will be it. And what I mean when I say top trusted team, Lauren, is I want other teams like developers and PMs to really trust on our advisement on whether we are good or not, based on our quality metrics, based on our test process, and all the OKRs that we can prove to them as well, you know? So yeah, that's it.
Sounds like you have a lot of people relying on you, well, many different areas too.
Yeah, that's totally correct.
Cool. And what have your previous experiences been like in QA, and what has it been like after moving to Turing?
Yeah, so I pretty much started my career back in 2010, when the smartphone touch era was scaling very fast, especially here in Brazil. And I was working at a telecommunications company that manufactures mobiles to all over the world. So I was pretty much focused on Latin America, making sure the software for those mobiles projects were in a good shape before we released those to the all the regions that we were in charge. And then after around 8 years, I moved to another company, different business, same area, quality assurance, that was focused on streamers. So again, we used to run some projects focused on streamers, video streamers, and our responsibility was to assure all the requirements for those set-top boxes, which is quite an old name for that. But anyway, we were responsible to assure all the software were fulfilling the requirements. And in that particular case, we were very much focused on the user experience, because the UI, the experience itself is key for that type of product, you know, because you're like zapping all the time, you're trying to find the content you like the most without any bugs, in a very smooth way. So that was our focus back in the time. And then I moved to Turing. which is a very new experience to me because it's in a startup. It's a startup.
Yeah.
Main difference, I would say, is how fast things are happening here and how fast we need to adapt to changes. But it's been just a great experience for me.
Awesome. Well, it must be fun to kind of move into a new arena. And yeah, like you mentioned, Turing has been really fast paced, especially as a startup. What are some of the challenges you've faced to adapt to such a fast paced work environment?
So imagine in this fully remote world, to build a fully remote team in a very fast-paced operation. So that's quite challenging because let me give some context here. When I first joined Turing, we were like building the team. We are still building the team, but we back in Q4 last year, we were just a few people, right, working for QA, and now we are in a very good shape, much better shape, and this whole team building process in a fully remote world was challenging because when you are in an office, all the communication is much more dynamic. I mean, I am very passionate about remote work. I am. However, if I can highlight some kind of downside of it would be communication. Communication is a little bit less dynamic in the remote world because again, back in the office, imagine yourself in the office again with your colleagues right in the left and in your right. You can just reach out to them, ask a question, and solve something like in seconds. In the remote world, it's not like that. You need to wait a little bit. You need to wait people's time to get the feedback. And this less dynamic communication make it a little bit more challenging to build a team because you need to ask people a lot of stuff in the hiring process, in the strategy that we're trying to follow when we're building a team, discussions that are important to define that strategy. Anyway, a lot of things. And that would be it. I mean, I think that was the most challenging thing. The communication efficiency in the remote world is something that I think that the entire world is learning how to adapt, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's great that there's been this huge shift to remote work, but like you mentioned, it comes with its challenges, but
Absolutely.
it certainly makes the world feel a little bit smaller, I think. And real quick, I noticed, so I heard of quality assurance. I've also heard of quality control. Can you tell me the main difference between the two?
Absolutely, yeah, that's a good one. And a lot of people doesn't know the main difference between both. How can we start that? Okay, I would say that quality control can be considered a subset of quality assurance, a small, tiny part of quality assurance, because the quality assurance is totally process-oriented rather than product-oriented. So in the quality assurance, we are pretty much testing the process itself from the design phase until the product release to production. So we want to make sure that every part of the software development lifecycle has the best practice we can make to reduce the risks of having bugs in the final product. This is a process-oriented way of working, which is quality assurance. On the other hand, quality control, which is very important as well as a subset, is pretty much focusing on the final product only. So in the quality control area, we take the product, we analyze it, we try to find bugs, and we can judge at that particular moment if it's okay or not to the production. And we cannot run only quality control, because if we rely only on the final verification of a product, we're going to delay many things. We're going to lose targets. We're going to increase the costs of fixing bugs, because remember the design phase I mentioned?
Yeah.
Let's give a practical example here. If we are building the requirements in some document, we can start testing there, and we can start finding bugs there. So if we find a bug in a document, we can just ask the PM, okay, that's doesn't make much sense because it's not going to fulfill the goal of this new feature. Can we fix that? Yes, absolutely. We can just change the how to frame the feature or change the design, and that's pretty much it. In some minutes, we can review and fix some documentation issue. On the other hand, when we find a bug in the final product that is ready for launch, we're going to ask, like, we need to take that piece of code, roll back to the developer, ask them to debug, analyze, fix the code, and launch all over again through the development lifecycle. So we will need to retest and then just then launch to the production. So you see that make the difference. In one hand, if we start testing in very early stage, the process oriented, it's much less costly to fix bugs.
Yeah, so maybe I'm really oversimplifying it, but quality assurance is kind of the process of maybe identifying bugs amongst other things before the product is launched versus quality controls right, when it's launched.
Just before it's launched, like okay. Just before it,
Yeah, interesting. And I'm sure it saves you, tons of time and resources. Like you don't have to do the entire development cycle twice if you are able to identify those bugs beforehand.
That's right. That's the idea.
Cool. Wow. So interesting. Well, thanks for identifying those differences. I feel like you cleared that up a lot. But I'd love to kind of transition to the main topic of this podcast. So we'll discuss Q&A specifically at Turing. And I know you mentioned this earlier. I'd love to pick your brain about it a little bit more, specifically with communication, working remotely. So we have people from different countries, time zones, cultures. Maybe besides communication, what challenges have you faced with working remote teams?
Yeah, at the same time, this is a challenge. It's one of the beauties of working with remote in a remote world, because you can know different cultures, and that's pretty much a very good side of it. And again, at the same time, it's a challenge because communication, which is a specific topic that I love to discuss about this. Communication is key for every company to succeed. We all know that, right? However, what we do not know, not all people knows, is that we need to adapt our communication styles with different cultures. And that's a very challenging task to do, because sometimes we may think that our communication style is the right one. And it could be the right one for some specific culture. For others, it could be different. There's a very interesting book, which I have right here, Lauren. A very interesting book that discusses exactly how we can adapt communication is culture map by Eric Meyer. It explains how we should adapt our styles, not only for communication, but for leadership, for feedback, and many other topics. But how can we adapt with different cultures? Let's give a very simple example. In the more to the Asia part of the world, Asian cultures, the communication style is a little bit more on a high context. So they expect you as a listener to be able to read between the lines. They expect you to do that, to be capable of doing that. So the communication is a totally shared responsibility, not only by who's transmitting the message, but from who's also listening to it. So it's a shared responsibility. On the other hand, if we come to the other side of the world, like more in North America or Latin America, the communication style differs a little bit on that. Not a little bit, quite a lot. So in that part, in that kind of culture, the who's transmitting the message usually makes sure to provide in a low context, meaning that they will provide you as much detailed information as possible to make sure there are no mistakes or no interpretation mistakes or miscommunications, no ambiguities or something like that. So who's transmitting the message will make sure to provide you all the pieces you need to have to get the right picture, to get the right message. So and that's just one example of how we can adapt and how we should adapt when we're discussing with different cultures, and again, it's quite challenging. Remote work is here to prove that. There's also, I'm sorry if I'm taking too long, but I just love this. Yeah, I just love this topic. There's also some very important things about communication that's called the 3 V's. Pretty much the 3 V's of communications are verbal, vocal, and visual. And that's there are many studies that proves that the communication efficiency relies pretty much on the visual. So I don't remember the numbers now, but around 50% of the communication efficiency relies on that, on the visual.
Wow.
And I'm sure that you've faced it that many times already, Lauren. How many times we are in a meeting where people just don't turn their cams on? They just hide behind the camera, and that's 50% of the communication going down. Because when you're seeing someone talking to you, you can understand by their expressions, by their face, their gestures, and also the other 2 V's. It's good to discuss a little bit. Verbal. The verbal is pretty much the message. Verbal is what you're saying, how you frame it, how you present your message. And again, don't remember the numbers, but around, I think 30 something percent of the communication efficiency relies on the verbal, which is very important. And the vocal, your tone, how high you're talking or how low you're talking. So this is also very much important. If those 3 V's are in sync, if those 3 V's are making sense, it's much easier to get people's attention. So let's say I'm presenting to you a very good news, very exciting news. However, my vocal is very low and my visual is very low as well. I'm talking about a very exciting thing in a very low way. People will not understand. People will be confused. So the communication efficiency, it will be jeopardized in that case, So yeah, those are some things that we should be like having in mind, bearing in mind whenever we're talking to people.
Right. And I'm sure those 3 V's even vary culture to culture as well to bring the culture back into it. I'm sure Americans have a different way of speaking, just as Brazilians and, like you mentioned, other cultures. So
that's like
a big puzzle. Like, not only do you have to actually do the QA work, but you have this added layer of communication, remote work. So
yeah, so communication is key to every team to succeed, right? So it's not only for QA, but it's
true.
I mean, it's very interesting.
Yeah. And what was that book again? You said The Culture Map?
Yeah, The Culture Map by Erin Meyer.
Cool. I'm adding that to the list. So
yeah, that's good. That's a good one.
Very cool. And this is kind of in the same vein, but what do you look for in potential candidates when you're hiring QA engineers?
Very good. So I think it was Peter Schultz, that a former Porsche CEO, that has this famous quote: hire character, train skills. And that's pretty much how I try to do it when I'm looking for candidates. Of course, the technical part is very important, and we want that, and we need that in our teams. But the technical part is something that you can leverage with the time in a very fast-paced way as well. Depends on how fast learner is the person, of course. But on the other hand, when you do not have the right character, just one example, like when you have someone very much introverted, and you need to be, for that position, you need someone more outgoing. It's very, very difficult and challenging to change that personality, and you may not want to change that. So that's why I'm saying you need to focus on the type of character you need for that position, and focus on that, and then analyze and assess the technical part. And if you have a good balance between both, it's the ideal world. if the candidate is good and is in both sides perfect word, but I would prioritize the character and then analyze all the technical skills I need for that position, you know?
Yeah. How do you recommend people work on those skills, if there is a way?
The soft ones, the character ones, or the technical?
Let's say soft skills.
Yeah. So communication is again something that is essential for you to succeed in any role. I would say not any role, but most of the roles, technical or not. And you can start by simple things like going a little bit out of your comfort zone and turning your camera on during a meeting, because it's I think you may agree that sometimes it's a little bit more comfortable to just hide behind the cameras and not enabling people to see you. It's much more comfortable sometimes, right? So those small exercises like enabling the camera and presenting yourself is some good practices that can leverage your communication skills. What else? So sometimes you're a little bit too shy to make your points or to give your opinions on during meetings. Again, start with very small pieces. You don't need to pause a meeting and like develop a very extensive opinion or on something. Even though if you have it, if you're very shy, you can start with very tiny things. You can just say, yes, I would agree with that opinion. You can follow someone's opinion if you agree, and try to participate a little bit more actively on meetings. So yeah, small exercises like that can help you to leverage those soft skills, which are very hard to change, but it's possible, of course.
Yeah, that's some really great advice. There's this visual, it's like a circle, and your comfort zone is maybe a black dot. And then everything that, I guess, the area of growth or where you would grow is outside of that comfort zone. So it might be a little bit challenging at first, but yeah, that's some great advice.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. And kind of shifting more to teams and QA. So QA is a shared responsibility between cross-functional teams. So what are some of the challenges you face, or yeah, what are some of your ideas on that?
Yeah, very good. So again, people commonly misunderstand QA as the responsible team to press the button and enable the release, or to approve the release, or to block it. So it's not like that. No, the QA team will work on metrics. The QA team will work on quality gates. And we're going to present the numbers. We're going to present the numbers, again, on a very easy and ideal world, Lauren. We would have all the green lights for all the software, the software features, and we would have like no questions about if it's good or not. Of course it's good. We have passed all the scenarios. Let's do it. And that's not happening in real life. In real life, what we have is pretty much numbers that shows some kind of software stability. And the decision to enable that to the production, to release it or not, is shared because QA has one perspective, developers has another, and PMs, product owners, may have another perspective. So all of those visions should be discussed together with the numbers to make the right decision. So let's say we have a software that is like not perfect as it happens in the real world, and we need to make a decision to release it or not. Even though we have some bugs, we may need to release that because that particular feature could be very important to achieve some key metric for the business. And if that's the case, sometimes, yes, we will reach a consensus between all the areas and make the decision to release, even though we have some open bugs, let's say, you know? So in the two sides, it would be very easy to decide. And in the side of having no bugs, 0 bugs, very easy to decide. And the other, it's also easy when we have a obvious blocker feature, blocker bug to the feature, it's also easy to decide. All this range, all this gray area between those both sides is a shared responsibility between all layers to decide whether to go or not.
Yeah. And it sounds like there's a lot of compromise, maybe a little give and take as well.
That's it.
Yeah. Cool. This is kind of related. You mentioned quality gates. So when do you know is the exact right moment to release? You might have already answered this.
Yeah, it's related. It's related, but the quality gates, just to explain in more details, is pretty much some criteria that we define in advance before even start testing that says, okay, if by the end of the test cycle, if we have 0 critical bugs, if we have 10% of major bugs, if we have no stability issues, then we're good to release. Those would be the quality gates, and those will and should be used as a reference to decide whether to go or not. However, again, even if we don't meet those, like all the quality gates, it may be some situations where we need to launch anyway because of some business decisions. That's why I'm saying that this is a common and shared responsibility between cross-functional teams.
Gotcha. And so are you the one who comes up with the quality gates, or that's that shared responsibility that you come up with together?
Usually the QA team is responsible to draft the quality gates and validate those with all the other teams, like PMs and also developers.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I have 2 more questions for you. So you touched on some of the soft skills that are crucial to being a part of the QA team and just, advancing your career in general. Do you have any other advice for QA engineers who are looking to advance their careers?
So yes, I would definitely highlight that one of the most looked profiles in a QA engineer these days is that person with the ability of coding. So why I'm saying that? Because in the past, like 10 or 15 years ago, it was not very common to have QA engineers with coding abilities. And this has changed over the years. And now I just missed the word in English, but the profile that people are looking the most in a QA person is that one, someone who can understand the code as well. It's a very slightly difference between a developer and a QA understanding the code, because and the difference, I think the main difference would be the bias that both sides can have. So the bias on the developer is that sometimes they rely too much on their product. They rely too much. They are too much confident on what they are delivering. And on the other side, the QA should not have that bias at all. It's quite the opposite. The QA should understand the code and should be suspicious all the time about that's probably not correct. Let me dig into it and find some bugs here. So whenever we have a QA person and able to read the code, to understand the code, it makes the process much easier because they can start debugging the bugs by themselves. And of course, eventually they will need developers' help to fix the code, especially, but they can provide much more complete information to the developer side for them to fix it. So this kind of code understanding makes the QA process much more efficient,
Yeah, interesting. I've heard of the term like T-shaped employees versus I-shaped. So having multiple skills that span different areas versus just concentrating in one area.
That's exactly it. So that's the point. So when the changes I've been seeing the most in the QA world is pretty much that a QA person not only focused and not only capable of assessing QA policies and QA ground rules. No, understanding a little bit more out of that context, and that makes them much more flexible, efficient, and so on.
Very cool. Well, you heard it here, folks. I guess, focusing on different areas of expertise and boosting your coding skills. But thank you so much for your time, Diego. This was absolutely fantastic.
Thanks to you, Lauren. That was a very nice talk. I hope that people can enjoy a little bit on what we discussed, and hopefully it will help some of the new developers and QAs that are entering this world.
Yeah, well, I know I learned a lot, and I hope this conversation similarly helps clarify questions about our QA efforts here at Turing. And yeah, like you mentioned, not only for questions about Turing, but the future QA engineers to help make QA product development better together. So thank you again so much. And thanks to everyone who stayed with us until now. And with that, we're closing today's session.
Thanks to you, Lauren, and bye-bye.
Bye.